Hey there, Film Buds. Welcome back to the Film Buds podcast. I'm your host, Paul.
And I'm Lauren.
And it's that time of year, folks. I heard my coworkers with children talking about it just earlier this week. It's back to school season.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, we were also in a Target recently, and it had, of course, the seasonal section was switched out to back to school supplies. No one was there yet. It's a little bit early, it's still a few weeks out for a lot of schools. It's more mid to the end of this month. For some it's even essentially almost the start of next month.
Yeah.
But it's that time.
Yep. Getting into the swing of things. Summer is going to sleep.
Yeah. I imagine for some kids, it's year-round school. So I imagine that some of them might already be back, if that's the case.
Well, doesn't year-round school just have, month breaks, and then they keep going?
Yeah, it's month breaks every 2 or 3 months or something like that. I can't remember what the metric is.
Copy. Interesting.
But yeah, so in general, that means that teachers are preparing their classrooms, getting syllabus together. New teachers are probably trying to make sure that all their paperwork is in order before starting the job.
So riveting.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff. Bureaucracy!
It's exciting.
And then, some kids I'm sure are probably trying to last minute read that book that they were supposed to read.
Oh, yeah, that was always me.
But I'm also sure that some children have not started it at all yet, and will not.
And yeah, that's the key. It's the won't.
Yeah. But with that in mind, we decided that we would go ahead and make all of August a back-to-school month.
Yes.
But we didn't just decide to do that. We decided that we would also go ahead and make each episode kind of themed around types of people that you see in a high school. So for today's episode, we're doing teachers. It's a very teacher-centric, teacher-forward sort of episode. But before we get too much into all of that, we, of course, we are at the start of a new month, we are at the start of a new theme, which means that we closed out our summer theme from July. What were your thoughts on how July went?
I had a lot of fun with July. It was a little bit of a month that we could kind of do whatever we wanted with, which is always fun. I really enjoy the months that come with automatic themes, but it's always fun to just do something just because. And it was just I really enjoy our heat metric of how hot or cold a movie actually was, on our very personal opinion based.
Yeah.
But isn't that the entire show? You listened to our opinions this entire time. This isn't new.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole point.
So I really enjoyed it. I'm excited for back to school month. It's definitely a time when I would be getting, I have very fond memories of doing back to school shopping with mom and dad, and getting ready for a new school year, and that always being the best dressed I was the entire year. And then I got lazy and bored and I didn't care anymore. So, it was always exciting. It was like a fresh start, it was like childhood's New Year's Eve, where you're like, all right, this is it. I got to make a new impression on these people after summer,
No, absolutely. And, I was growing up, I moved around a few times, and so typically it was a move during summer, and so I remember a lot of, obviously more of them were at a familiar school, but I remember, a handful of start of the years where it was at a new school in a whole new environment with entirely new faces, fresh start in every sort of sense.
Mm-hmm.
I did that when I moved, of course, obviously when I first started school in Morgantown Elementary, and then I actually moved halfway through third grade, or part of the way through third grade, and so then I was that kid who comes in at the end of a year, essentially. And then summer started, and I remember that summer in particular, not having really a lot of, people to hang out with because I came in so late that I didn't really, form a lot of, bonds in particular with anyone. Mm-hmm. And then we moved again, middle school, to North Carolina. That was the summer of Revenge of the Sith.
I don't know how you keep this crap,
And I think also Katrina.
Oh. Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, sort of a pendulum there for you.
Ooh, exciting.
And so, yeah, that's, it was always an exciting time. And I remember when I was a teacher for a brief period, I found the start of my first year particularly nerve-wracking. It was a brand new experience. I was teaching kids exactly 10 years younger than I was at that moment. And I was, not from the community at all. I was in a very small town. And so I also felt very much like a fish out of water. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of the new teachers that were coming to that school were from that area. And I certainly was not in any particular way. I stood out like a sore thumb comparatively to a lot of the other new teachers. But it was a nerve-wracking experience, and that first day, having to do your first lesson ever was pretty weird. But honestly, the magic of it also kind of wears off by about the end of the first day on a certain level.
And then the work just sinks in.
And not in not in the magic of it, I guess, fades away, but you get used to the routine when you have to do it 7 times in one day, kind of a thing.
Oh, yeah.
You really snap into, obviously not a perfect rhythm, but you get used to just being in front of those people, I think, pretty quickly, or at least I did. So yeah, it's an interesting experience, and different classes have different attitudes. Schools are such a weird environment. And I think that's why they're so cinematic. But we can talk about that later. Mm-hmm. So, like we said, this whole thing is a back-to-school month, and this first episode is focused on teachers. And we decided that we would go ahead and do 2 movies that kind of use similar structures, but are tonally very, very different.
Yeah. And
one is from the teacher perspective, whereas one, the teacher is just sort of our focal point. Mm-hmm. And we decided to do, obviously, if you're listening to the School of Rock and Dead Poet Society.
You gave away our secret. Gosh.
And so they're both sort of favorites of mine. I grew up watching both of them. I love both Robin Williams and Jack Black, and as far as cinematic teachers, they were both ones that came to mind for me very, very quickly as performances that stand out. Before we jump too far into that, I thought that I would give y'all just a few little interesting fun facts about education in America. This is going to, per the usual, be very, very broad. Even broader, actually, than usual, because I'm just sort of hitting some interesting general comments. And a few very specific factoids that I found interesting.
Okay, I like general comments and specific factoids. Fantastic.
So, first off, education was obviously less common, and a lot of people that were literate were really only literate in the sense that they could read the Bible. Because for a lot of people, that's the text that they were taught to read with, if they
Well,
were taught to read anything.
When every book has been burned, other than that one, it's kind of the only thing that you've got.
And so, but also a lot of impoverished people in the time didn't have time to be educated.
No, because they were working.
Exactly. And so for a lot of people, education was much more of a luxury. And really only if everyone had the time, or you could hire someone, or if you did live in a town that had a school. Some parts of New England did have mandates about schools, even as far back as colonial times, about, each community having a school, but also the enforcement of that is, I'm sure, very loose, and I'm also sure that the quality of that experience is very differential.
What?
And so that's sort of how education was formed early on. And of course, as colonies and U.S. territory spread, certain areas, newer colonies especially, newer territories didn't really have the same laws in place that New England had. And so in places like the South, where you did have a lot of agriculture, you definitely did not have as much education because it was also not mandated in any kind of way. Regarding higher education, America's oldest college is Harvard. It was originally not called Harvard. It was sort of renamed after a donation from a wealthy individual.
Named Harvard?
Yeah, his last name was Harvard.
Oh, wow, that's fancy.
And it was originally sort of began in preparation and function in September 8th, 1636. And the whole purpose of it was to create literate clergymen.
Oh.
Your school education was very up and down. Your clergyman was your most consistently literate person in a town.
Okay.
And so our first college was founded with the intent of creating literate clergymen. The character in The Crucible, the preacher that comes to town that gets bamboozled.
Yes.
He's
whatever his name is.
He's a Harvard man.
Oh.
So New England is much bigger into education in general. Beyond that, part of the other issue is that a printing press had been around, but for at least the first few years of colonial America, the first few decades, a printing press did not exist in the colonies. If people started coming to the colonies in the early 1600s, late 1500s, early 1600s, a printing press wasn't actually established until 1639.
Okay.
So, also just in terms of people having access to books and that sort of thing, pretty much unless you brought it over or had it shipped over, it's not like anyone was really cranking out materials to be read.
Other than the Bible.
And again, that was probably getting shipped over. So a printing press didn't get established until 1639, and guess where it got established?
New England?
Harvard.
Oh, how fancy. Just keeps getting fancier and fancier up there.
So, and the first printed item considered by most was something called the Freeman's Oath. It was a pledge that all property-owning men over the age of 20 had to take to live in the colony.
Oh.
Yeah.
Where are these American history books? I'd read them.
So, some of the early printed documents were catechisms, some school books, legal documents, sermons, and almanacs.
Okay.
And this, obviously more printing presses got added over time and that sort of thing. and more schools did crop up. More emphasis was put on schools in certain places, especially during certain periods. You hit the Enlightenment in the 1700s. And so you do have some of a shift towards education, but one of the big shifts for education in relation to children comes really with industrialization. Because with industrialization now, there are more families that don't necessarily have to work all of their children on the farm.
Mm-hmm.
And so at least up until a certain age, potentially, you have more children who are having to be cared for, and so they're going to school for those purposes. You also do have people who are now prospering more in general, and so they're able, on a certain level, to send their children to school in ways that they weren't able to before. And then, of course, as time progresses forward with industrialization, also, of course, comes the shift in emphasis towards child labor laws to protect children and get them out of mines and factories and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of that sort of starts to shift and get children into schools. But then, of course, also industrialization starts to make printing easier. And the printing press is now an even more capable process. So even more materials of all kinds are able to be printed. Also, by this point, New England has included private high schools, which become the precursor to prep schools.
Oh, okay.
Which are intended to be a direct pipeline to the Ivy League academies that have cropped up in New England over this period of time.
Copy.
Education in the South, however, did of course not remain particularly much of a priority. And you did, of course, still have issues exacerbated by the Civil War and Reconstruction.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, eventually later on, racial inequality as Jim Crow and segregation started to also impact schools.
Mm-hmm.
And so education also became a battleground because education, everything happens in a web, it's all interconnected. And so education was, of course, a battleground for all sorts of other issues at the time, and one of those, or has always been a battleground for relevant issues occurring at the time. And so segregation became one of those as well. Schools became segregated. Then, of course, by the mid-20th century, segregation, of course, comes to an end in schools with Brown versus the Board of Education, which happens in 1954, which starts to begin the wave of desegregation across schooling, which is a very fraught process, as anyone will tell you.
Mm-hmm.
And so it didn't fix certain things, and it caused other rabbit hole issues. And as a fun fact for the creation of certain things, it wasn't until 1953 that there was a Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. And it is not until 1979 that it is divided into the Department of Education. And actually, the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare was the first cabinet position created since 1913.
Wow! My goodness.
Boom. So those are some education factoids for you. So education is a really interesting thing that I could have really gone down a lot of very deep, different rabbit holes with. But classrooms have always been reflective of their time. And some of the fraught issues of any time happening are also being discussed and targeted at, children and that sort of thing. There were think about, like, duck and cover. Right? That's the nuclear fear penetrating the classroom. So you see these kinds of things. Dare.
Yeah.
The war on drugs entering the classroom. So that's very reflective across the history of education. And so it's a very complex place. Schoolrooms are very complex places. Teachers are in... once upon a time, it was referred to as en loco parentis, which was essentially like in acting as a parent. You know, you were the temporary custodian and guardian of these children for a period of time. That was kind of what was used for a blip as justification for corporal punishment in the classroom. And so you were acting as their guardian. And so... it's a very complex thing, and over time, education has been well-funded and defunded, and programs have been added in. Part of the reason we have so much math and science is because of the space program. And so...
And look at how much stuff we're still doing in space.
And the Cold War and that sort of thing, and wanting to be able to create bigger and better in the face of the Russian menace. And so... And the Red Menace at large, right? Both... Maoist China and communist Russia. And so those were some of the ways that it penetrated and seeped into the classroom. And so it's always gone through these ebbs and these flows of being, fraught with policy. Even though at its core, it's intended to be a place where children are able to grow, ask questions, develop, be exposed to new ideas in a safe way, and flourish, and figure out who they are as they become an adult, because at 18 they're going to step out into the world, and they need to have some sort of foundation of what they are before having to do things like decide if they want to go to college or sign up for the military or become a janitor and be happy with that. But you have to go and create some sort of foundation of a rounded whole person that also arrives at all of these thoughtful decisions at a place of having some capacity of being an autonomous person. By the time that they turn 18 and graduate, you should have some foundation of what functionally looks like the beginnings of an adult.
In theory.
In a perfect world.
In theory.
Yeah. But in actual practice, especially, it's a very difficult job. It's very underfunded. And teachers have a very hard time. And I think that teachers definitely get cast into different camps. And so for our first teacher that we'll talk about, we've got, of course, the inspiration. This is the stand and deliver kind of teacher. With Dead Poets Society, you've got the exemplar of inspirational teacher. And so let's go ahead and start jumping on into our first teacher, Mr. John Keating, in Dead Poets Society.
Let's.
All right. So the film was released June 9th, 1989. It's 2 hours, 8 minutes. It is PG. The plot is maverick teacher John Keating uses poetry to embolden his boarding school students to new heights of self-expression. It is directed by Peter Weir. It is written by John Schulman. It stars Robin Williams as John Keating, Robert Sean Leonard as Neil Perry, Ethan Hawke as Todd Anderson, and that's pretty much all that I got for you. So, dear, why don't you go ahead and take it away, since they've heard me ramble and wax poetic long enough.
Wax poetic. It's almost like he planned that joke. Okay, Dead Poet Society. I had never seen this movie before or heard of it. This was not a staple in the household of my upbringing. I'm definitely more familiar with Robin Williams' like comedic stuff than his more dramatic things. I'd say just kind of like as a broad scale.
Your mom likes Patch Adams. Is that correct?
I believe so. I mean, I've never watched Patch Adams with her, so.
Well, there we have it, I guess, also.
Fuck
me.
Well, I mean, it's also, the availability of the item at the time, back in the day it was a lot harder to get access to something. You either had to come on TV or you had to own it.
No, for sure.
So, and we did not own Patch Adams. But this movie was truly touching. It was really hard at points, but like also very inspiring, and some of the things that I loved about the school that we went to, honestly, going to an arts program, you really felt taken care of, free to do what you want to do, though, like, and figure out who you want to be as a person without any true judgment from anybody. And I thought that this was such a beautiful story of these young boys basically making personal decisions of whether or not they were going to allow somebody else to plan their lives for them. And each of their stories are different, and each of the things that they're fighting against is unique and individual, and they all approach it in different ways, but it's all thanks to the inspiration of this amazing teacher played by Robin Williams, who does a phenomenal job. But also, I think that the best comedians make the best dramatic roles as well, because they know how to get to the harder places, which is comedy, and make that an honest and true funny moment that, like, bringing something heavy to the table isn't going to be an outrageous ask of them. And no, I thought that this movie was really sweet, and really just one of those coming of age stories that really sticks with you. And I understand now why it's been referenced so many times, even without me knowing that it's been referenced so many times. But I honestly, I really enjoyed this movie a lot. It was great to see familiar faces and people that I'd also never seen before. I loved the fact that that goddamn Kirkwood Smith is still playing some guy who's just a crappy dad. I love that that's his brand. He's like, I'm the mean dad. Like, look at my face.
I'm the grumpy one.
Yeah. It's so funny, though, because also, like, I feel like if my dad were white, Kirkwood would play my father fantastically.
No, that's fair.
But, it would also be like a more cheery role for him as well, because my dad is not an asshole.
Well, and Kurtwood Smith played the bad guy in a few things as well when he was younger. Mm-hmm. So he when he was younger, he had obscure face, so he was bad guy. Mm-hmm. And then as he got older, he just sort of transitioned into, like, grumpy dad.
Yeah, exactly. He just looks like a sourpuss.
But that's the brand,
No, honestly, he does a great job at him. Like, he really finds the ways that, like, you just want to hate him so authentically and so honestly, and, like, I just there's not a lot of people who can do that.
No. So Dead Poets, like I said, is one that I had grown up seeing. My mom loves Robin Williams, and she loved Robin Williams in this movie. And it was one of those that also growing up as someone who would watch, AFI's Top 100 films and retrospectives and that sort of thing. It was one that you would also see a lot. And so it was one that I had an interest in seeing as well. And I loved it the first time that I saw it, and my appreciation for it has definitely grown over time. I think in a lot of ways it feels very much like a novel.
I think that's fair.
And I think that in some ways, the reason that it also sort of especially caught for a certain generation is that it hits a similar sort of itch to Catcher in the Rye. Mm-hmm. But I think that whereas the book, as you're reading it, can be somewhat devoid of humanity for Holden, you know, I think that this manages to find a lot of humanity for all of their boarding school children. And so I think that it manages to also hit some of that spirit, though, you know, of that coming of age, of the weird fragility of that time, of being young, but also being confronted with things like someone dying, you know, very unexpectedly, because that's part of the thing that has Holden all fucked up. And so I think that you see a lot of that similar tones and texture sort of pulled into this, and I think that it has a very novel feeling. There are a lot of times when I'm watching this movie where I go, and this is where there was going to be narration. You know, that was like mostly like an excerpt of whatever had been in the novel, you know, kind of a thing. That filled in the gaps, you know?
Yeah.
I felt it all of the time at certain moments in this movie.
The English patient.
Yeah, a little bit like thing, that, yeah. Know? But that's not necessarily a knock, but that is also just how it sort of, I think, reads for me as that novel feeling, you know? It feels like this movie should come with narration. No,
yeah, I mean, this movie feels very, like, epic and grand, almost like, oh god, like Downton Abbey or something, you know, very, like, Emily Dickinson wrote this or something, you know, it's very, very posh, very, like, polished, upper-class society.
We've got, like, Bill Pullman, you know, doing the narration for, like, the old man version of Ethan Hawke's character.
No, yeah. exactly. You know, it's very Stand By Me with the, like, monologue at the end of, like, where they are now, you know, the Sandlot.
Precisely, yeah.
So, no, I get what you mean. And, like, honestly, for it being 2 hours, 8 minutes, it doesn't feel long
it breezes through it.
Yeah, it feels, you know, your attention is with this movie the entire time, and I think that it could have been worse, but if it was, you know, written or done by a different team. Mm-hmm. I think that it would be a longer slog if it wasn't so fucking charming.
Well, and much like difficult parts in Shakespeare, you do, to your point, have to land the John Keating part. Because if you put a different actor into that position, does this movie work as well anymore? I don't know. As much as I love someone like Steve Buscemi, does Steve Buscemi work as much anymore as John Keating? It would be, of course, a very different John Keating.
No, yeah.
But I'm not sure that you could do some of the things that you do to the same degree that they're able to do them with Robin.
No, yeah, and honestly, I love Robin Williams. I think that he's a phenomenal performer in every aspect. But there are also things that are very much a Robin-ism, and I don't get distracted by the things that are very blatantly Robin about his performance at all. I think that they blend really nicely into what he's doing, because, you know, Robin can be goofy. He loves to do voices. He loves to do, you know, outrageous body postures and all of this, that, and the other. And not every performance needs that. And I think that it's sweet and fun that he found a way to still bring the things that we love about him into this organically without it being overpowering to the character.
No, absolutely. And speaking on the school premise of it, I think that it does land an authentic depiction of youth and boyishness and boyish exuberance, especially when you have like a group of just nothing but dudes living together. Mm-hmm. And I think that it captures a really authentic school atmosphere as well for the most part. What is something, I guess, for you that you look for when you're watching something that makes you go, this feels like a real high school? Or a real school in general versus, like, that would never, no.
I don't know. my brain instantly was like, business. They need to be doing business. And I was like, that's not specific enough.
No.
But
actor business.
No, exactly. I was like, that's not a helpful note or a thing that I look for. I think that in order to portray like a school in film, or authentically, I'm trying to think of all of the movies that I think really do like a school atmosphere really well. I don't know. There's usually always conflict of some sort, you know. There are levels of what kind of students there are. You know, there are the good students, there are the bad students, you know. Even in this really posh school, there are still students that are succeeding more than others. But at the end of the day, I think that there has to be some kind of connection between these people. I think that really holds it as a school, because like at the end of the day, they see each other every day, all day, for hours on end. It's like your coworkers. You have to, you know, you talk to these people outside of just doing your work, you know. And if there isn't that relatability between these characters and those friendships and those relationships shown authentically, I don't think that the environment would land as strongly. You know, it's these boys growing up together, literally, you know, and then the new kid and him finding his way into the group and opening up as a person as well because of this. You know, he doesn't have to be shy anymore. He has friends, you know. And that's why it's so tragic when he, you know, loses one of his friends that he just makes. But it's like Mean Girls, you know, to do a completely alternative high school environment. There still needs to be, you know, even though that's a comedy, there still needs to be these relationships between the characters that are believable. You know, I have to believe that Janice and oh my gosh, what is his name? Damien are these weird outcasts who just don't give a fuck. And I need to believe that the Plastics have worked themselves into this exact thing, you know, because this is the only way that they've gotten this far, is by these traits that have brought them together.
Well, and I think that Mean Girls also really lands well on the whole, if you go to a high school big enough, you know, a lot of boarding school movies, one of the upsides of boarding school movies is the intimacy of the boarding school movie. Mm-hmm. One of the downsides of the boarding school movie is it can feel almost too small or too focused. Mm-hmm. Whereas when you get to something like Mean Girls, I think they capture that whole, you go to a school big enough and you might not be really in many classes with the people that you consider your friends. You know, Katie doesn't really have any classes with Regina. She doesn't really have any classes with Damien. You know, she has a few here and there, but like they don't have the identical schedules. They're not traveling to all the same classes together. And so I think that that's also something that you notice in movies that are doing a better or a worse job at capturing what's realistic to a school and a schoolroom experience.
No, I think that that's completely fair. And I was trying to think of another boarding school movie, and the first thing that I thought of was the Harry Potter franchise, especially like the first one. And I think that because it's so focused on, you know, our trio of our group of people and their disparate friend group outside of that, you know, with our random two other people that we like chunk in. We're like, Neville and Dean, come on down. Oh, a little bit of Seamus too. Yay, now we've got 6 kids. But that's really it. And the rest of the school is, even though it's, you know, filled with children, after those several movies, it just doesn't feel like a school anymore. And honestly, it's because of the fact that they're missing all of the outward noise that makes it feel like a busy, bustling place. Because also, you know, I know that Hogwarts is a boarding school, but it still has, I would assume, the same amount of students throughout its entire, you know, every year should have the similar amount of kids, because as kids go, kids come. So the fact that it doesn't feel like a school anymore is just because they start to cut the cast and cut the extras, honestly, a lot down to the point where, like, it's just focused on Harry, and you almost forget that he's, like, in school.
No, I definitely get what you mean. So if you had to rate Dead Poet Society out of 5, what would you give it?
Honestly, I think that this movie is a truly perfect movie. I think that this is a 5 out of 5 movie for me. I think that it is touching and sweet and also completely relatable, and I think that it hits on all of the right kind of beats for a movie like this. And I also understand, because it is a perfect movie, why it gets parodied so much.
No, yeah. No, you know what? I'm going to go with a 5 out of 5 as well. I think that it manages to also subtly, while being an incredible film with incredible performances by the young cast, which has great chemistry together. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the other things that does, of course, sell it, is that all of our young men have great chemistry together. Mm-hmm. And so the ensemble crackles all of the time. And all of their spontaneous moments, feel organic. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of the power of the movie for sure, is that they have very, very talented young men handling the entire lead cast. But I think it's very well done. I think it's very well structured. I think that they also, on top of making a great movie, making a great story, do also show how a lot of literature that I'm sure people think of as fussy doesn't have to be. No,
yeah, it was great to watch these kids, like, perform, and get out of their shells with something that would for most people seems so classical and bourgeois. Mm-hmm. No, it was just absolutely wonderful to watch this coming of age story. I really enjoyed watching, these kids get to go out of their shell with something so abstract as, like, the focal point, but also I loved the moral of this story is to allow to children to be children, but also that, stepping outside of the box doesn't have to be a bad thing, and being different isn't a negative trait. You should embrace the things that make you different and love those things about yourself. Mm-hmm. It's just such a really beautiful movie.
Yeah, and so I think that I'll give it a 5 as well. Moving on, we have Richard Linklater's School of Rock.
Woo!
School of Rock was released October 3rd, 2003. It runs an hour 49 minutes. It's rated PG-13. It's directed by Richard Linklater. It is written by Mike White. The cast is Jack Black as Dewey Finn, Mike White as Ned Schneebly, Adam Pascal as Theo, Joan Cusack as Rosalie Mullins, Sarah Silverman as Patty DeMarco, and Miranda Cosgrove as Summer Hathaway.
That's right.
And the premise is, after being kicked out of his own rock band, Dewey Finn becomes a substitute teacher of an uptight elementary private school, only to try and turn his class into a rock band. I guess I'll go ahead and kick this bad boy off.
Sure thing.
Real quick side note. The reference earlier that I made to private schools being a gateway to the Ivy League, going back to Dead Poet Society very briefly, that's also the whole point of why they make in that speech, 70% of our graduates went on to the Ivy League, is because, like, that's what the whole thing is riffing on. Exactly.
Oh, okay.
So, going back to School of Rock now.
Fantastic.
It's one of those that I saw growing up. I really think that for some reason we watched this on VHS for the first time, like we rented it from a Blockbuster and watched it at home. And I think that that's how I saw this for the first time, or maybe it was a DVD. I don't remember. But medium aside, I remember watching it and just really thinking that it was so exciting. And this is, I think, one of the first movies that also really got me into Jack Black as an actor. I don't think that I had really seen a lot of his films before this point. This was also one of the first Richard Linklater movies that I saw. And so, for me, this was a movie that I really, really loved. And it's always one that every time I go back to, I have just as good of a time every time. Oh, you know? Yeah. It's a routinely enjoyable film. And I think that is because it knows that it is structurally riffing on both Dead Poets Society and Music Man. You know, it's sort of the lightning rod of the inspirational teacher, but also the fraudster story. Because the fraudster has to come in and razzle-dazzle you and get you to buy into his idea, which is kind of exactly what a inspirational teacher has to kind of come in and do. And I think that it does this really great job of walking this fine line of making Dewey, who could be a scummy character, a likable one. And I think that it's a very, very successful overall movie. And I think another part of that is also the fact that Richard Linklater really took the time to cast the thing right in terms of the youth cast as well. Oh, yeah. No, for sure. What about you? I love this movie. I think that this movie is a hoot and a blast and just a razzle-dazzle good time, honestly. I always really enjoyed watching Jack Black movies growing up. I thought that he was really, I enjoyed his amount of energy, you know, as a performer and a dramatic child at birth. You know, being able to be so flexible as a performer, I always really enjoyed. So the fact that he's basically like a living cartoon was really appealing to my small, fragile mind. But I don't remember when I actually, like, watched this movie. I don't remember, like, watching it in theaters, but I do remember watching it very, like, shortly after it coming out. And I just fell in love with this movie. I wanted to be in this movie so bad. I wanted to be one of those kids. Because when this movie came out, I was 10. You were, like, probably 11 at the point. But that's neither here nor there. I wanted to be in this movie so bad. I thought that this movie kicked ass. I loved the idea of being a performer. And this just was like the movie for me. And it still slaps. It's so good still. It's absolutely fantastic. You know, there are times when you want to watch something that you grew up loving and you're like, oh God, but what if it's garbage now? Like, what if it's really racist and I didn't know because of my young, fragile child brain and the fact that the early 2000s was a different time, man. But no, it still holds up. It still holds up great. Yeah. Absolutely fantastic, and it still works as like an inspirational teacher movie as well. It's just in a different kind of way, but to your point, this is very much like Dead Poets Society in the sense that it's this rebellious teacher energy bringing, you know, rebellion to these very molded and perfect children. Exactly. And I think that's a really interesting storyline. You know, the idea of bringing it's like Footloose, you know, bringing dance to the town. Exactly. And it's also poetry and music. Yeah, they're brothers, you know? They're completely the same, just one has an actual beat and you know, music underneath it, whereas the other one is just spoken. But you can do it's the exact same structure for the most part of song lyrics to poetry. Song lyrics gets to be cheaper sometimes because they get music added to them. Justin Bieber, I am looking at you, baby, baby, baby. Ooh. But no, I'm
to your point, this is completely parallel with that kind of idea that you can express yourself through this medium, and understanding the value of this form of what you understand it. It's because, like, in Dead Poet Society, he's an English teacher and he focuses on poetry because of its variety. And Jack Black is a person who has been touched by the rock gods and just wants to rock and roll, and sees these very talented musician children, but that's boring, and let's spice it up, because also I have my own kind of crappy plan in mind for all of this, and it turns out good in the end, guys. But if you haven't seen it. But, no, this movie's super charming, and to your point, like, all of the kids are great. The cast is fantastic. I love how they kind of, like, even parallel the character tropes, where it's, like, the really uppity child who's, like, the perfect achiever child who, needs to get the rod unshoved from their butt. Then there's the kid who's being pushed around by his parents, but he just wants to be an artist.
Yeah, Zach is kind of an amalgam of sort of Neil and Todd. Combined into one. He's got the bad dad of Neil, but he has the shyness of the Todd figure. Yeah,
and then needs to be pulled out of this whole how shy.
The drummer is our Nawanda.
Yes, that's right. That is right. That's right. Because he starts to, like, roll. He's like the bad boy one, and the bassist gets nothing to do. Oh gosh. Other than Miranda Cosgrove, like, the other girls in this cast don't really get a lot to do, which is so unfortunate. But that's also very early 2000s. To now, to before, to always.
No, and I think that, part of the authenticity of what's on screen is the fact that they did get, if I'm not mistaken, musically talented children. And so that also is, of course, what you get to have on screen. You're not looking at kids who are holding guitars that don't know what the fuck they're doing with them.
It is phenomenal to watch these kids play.
And so because Richard Linklater took the time and the effort to get kids or shape kids into being musically ready on screen, you also get the electricity of an authentic performance from these kids. They don't have to think about playing the guitar or playing the drums. They do know how to do these things.
No, yeah, and, like, to your point, I think that it is, because you said shape, and I was thinking, honestly, I think that it's going to be a lot easier, actually, to get kids that can play, and then figure out how to get them to act.
Yeah.
Because I think that, you can have a little bit of, like, a lightning in a bottle moment where, like, these kids are doing, that's why the bassist doesn't do anything, because I think that, they were like, lines for her is an iffy situation. Let's just have her slap that bass. Like, she doesn't even get a solo in any of the times when they're, like, giving people instrument solos. Homegirl is hitting those 2 notes on the bass and doesn't do nothing else.
No.
You better believe it.
That's right. And so, but I think that, all the time you see, even with movies with adult actors, where you see them and you're like, that's not what that guitar is doing.
No, and you can also tell with the way that they shot it that these are actually them playing these notes as well.
They're not trying to hide anything.
No. Yeah, that you are watching these kids actively play these notes, and, like, maybe the audio is not
piped in later.
Yeah, exactly, because that's how movies work. But it's also still probably that child still playing it. Like, it's not why on earth would you go through the effort of having these musician children, but then hiring professional musicians to play over them? Like, that's ridiculous.
No, I get that.
Let the talent shine.
No, I think that Joan Cusack also does a tremendous job. I think that, again, she takes a character that is a stereotype role that could have been trite in someone else's hands and plays the part very authentically and very warmly. I think it's a very genuine performance. It's a very genuinely funny performance.
Oh, well, Joan Cusack is so hysterical, honestly. I think she knows exactly who she is thinking of while she's playing this part, and is like, these are the funny things about this person for me. You know, like, she really nails it on the head. So good.
So honestly, like, I really don't have a lot of notes for it. I thought Mike White did a great job, you know, pulling down double duty, you know, writer and actor.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, for me, and maybe this is gonna ruffle somebody's feathers, but I don't really care right now. My sore thumb in the entire cast was Sarah Silverman.
Oh, okay.
Like, it could have been...
She was just alright for you?
Like, yeah, like, it could have been anybody else. It didn't have to be her. She wasn't funny at all. And I don't know if she was ever trying to be, but I just felt like that character was just sitting so hard and just being annoying that there was just nothing really likable about her.
No, I understand that.
It
never felt like her barbs with Dewey were ever playful.
Yeah, exactly. To the point then that they turned negative. Like, I felt like every time she was just, like, constantly being like, me, like the naggy girlfriend.
Yeah, they really did, like, properly put her in a nag role.
Yeah, you know, and I feel like if it was somebody else, it would have been a little bit less abrasive.
That's fair.
You know, because also I think that character is the same type of character as the, oh gosh, I don't remember her name at the moment, but the mean girl in, Legally Blonde, the brunette.
Yeah.
You know, like, there are still likable things about her. She is still, like, our mean person.
Was Judy Greer not available?
I mean, honestly.
It was the early aughts. She was working then.
Yeah. Put Judy in more things.
Do put Judy Greer in more things.
Judy Greer deserves it.
So, what would you give School of Rock out of 5?
Even with Sarah Silverman giving me the why are you here vibes, I still think that this movie is a perfect film. I think that this movie is an absolute blast. It still kicks ass and is totally worth a 5 out of 5 gold stars.
No, I think that's fair. Going back and touching on your point about comedic actors, you know, I think that a lot of comedians will typically pick up something to make a part of whatever their comedic persona is, or they will take something that they already like and blend it into their comedic persona.
Okay.
And I think that what both of these movies did a great job with is taking each of our comedic actors' comedic traits and comedic skills and using those as the bedrock of that teacher performance, you know? Mm-hmm. And so I think that it allowed Robin Williams to do his voices great and be energetic and wacky. And here, similarly, Jack Black got to be energetic and wacky, but also, of course, got to be as musically talented and able as he is.
Yeah.
Because he is such a truly talented musician.
Honestly, oh gosh, okay, what's the movie that Jack Black did?
Tenacious D and the Pick of Destiny?
That, yes. This had all of those vibes in it, but, like, obviously the child version, even though it's rated PG-13, okay, sorry. One random toe out of my original idea. The fact that this movie is PG-13 and the other movie is PG is purely because of the times, because honestly, at the end of the day, I think that both of these movies should be rated PG-13. Because otherwise, if the other one gets to be PG, then this movie gets to be PG.
It's either they need to be either or.
Yeah, exactly.
Either they're both PG or they're both PG-13.
Because I think that it is ridiculous that School of Rock, that has a mostly child-based cast, regardless of them doing, like, adult themes, or whatever, I think that this movie is perfectly appropriate for children.
Mm-hmm.
And I completely don't remember my other original thought.
That's all right.
But yeah, totally fine.
No, I think that Jack does a great job in the film. I think that it's a kinetic performance. I think he's got great chemistry with the kids, mm-hmm. you know, and I think that's another thing is that I think that as an actor, to be a teacher that is supposed to be heartwarming, you should also have chemistry with the children. And I think that you read that in both of these instances fully as well. And so I'm inclined to also give School of Rock a 5 as well. I think that this is a really great, enjoyable, energetic, fun, truly, for everyone movie.
No, yeah. Oh, I do remember my original thought. This is very much like the kid version of Tenacious D, but also I assume that either Mike White knows exactly how to write a Jack Black original song, or I feel like a lot of the music that is performed in here is actually written by Jack.
Yeah, very probably. I probably could have and should have looked that up beforehand. My apologies, dear listener.
No, it's totally fine. Also, I love the fact that Adam Pascal is so high up on the list.
You know why.
I do know why, but he is in 3 scenes.
His agent took care of him, don't you worry.
Oh, yeah, no. We take care of our talent here.
And so...
he gets to be right after Joan Cusack.
Before we jump into our last little discussion, I do have, I guess, one quick question. What do you consider, what qualities do you look for in someone for you to consider them a good teacher? And name a teacher that you consider one of your most inspirational teachers.
Okay, what makes a good teacher? I think a good teacher has focus, but is malleable, to the situation of what your students need in that moment, but also is kind of like the lightning rod of the room. Like if you're in a bad mood, if you're not willing, if you don't want to teach, then why should I want to learn? Mm-hmm. Kind of thing. Like if you're not excited about coming in here and doing this, then why should I be a part of this either? And I think that also having an actual understanding of your subject as well is super important, because you can be a teacher of a subject and not know anything about it. Mm-hmm. I do a job all of the time, daily, that I only know my portion of what I'm doing, and that's it. And I feel like that's a little sketch. But I think that teachers should totally know, their subject through and through, so that way when they do get those weird questions from students, they actually have an answer for them. More like Robin Williams's character than Jack Black's. But having this depth of this wealth of knowledge, I think that is always important as well. And I think that my most inspirational teacher, the teacher that I think about the most, was probably Mr. Calvar, my chorus teacher in high school. I was in awe of this man. He was the most talented person, not in he was the most amazing singer, but he had a mind that understood music like nobody else's that I had ever seen. And I truly was so impressed by him, and the fact that I got to work with him closely for so many years. I knew exactly what I wanted to do when I was growing. I knew that I was in good hands as a performer with this person, with this man. And he was a great person to be around. Also, in off hours as well, he was super personable, super funny, and when I wasn't doing my best in LA, he was right beside me the entire time. So I think that being being a reliable, trustworthy force is also very important with being a teacher. Because at the end of the day, outside of the house, you're the only you're the next adult that this child has in their circle, and sometimes you get the things that parents don't get to see. And, I think that should be taken with respect and with honor. And, I think that those are the things that make a good teacher.
No, I'm in a lot of agreement with what you said. you really should know your subject as thoroughly as you humanly possibly can. And you should always be trying to learn more about your own subject. You should definitely be trying to remain ahead of any student that you have in the future. I think you need to also... You need to be able to handle hard moments with grace. You know, you don't have to be perfect, but you do have to sometimes, to your point, deal with things that other parents don't have to deal with, you know, with their child. You sometimes have to deal with the meeting point of children and a lot of different temperaments coming together in a very particular environment. And some of those dynamics don't mesh well. You have to be able to read a room, you know, and I think that's another thing about being a comedian, you know, and playing a teacher. You have to be able to read a room to an extent. You have to be able to spot who's doing, you know, who communicates with who better than others. What's a bad pairing of people. It's a very complicated job that requires essentially also at the end of the day a lot of plate spinning. And so you also have to be someone who's capable of keeping all of those plates going until the moment that you really can, you know, unstack them. And if you've done things really well, then, you know, you should be able to, in a perfect situation, again, unstack them neatly. But the issue is that it's also currently a very fraught job, a very underfunded job. I mean, the school that I was working at, when we had a smaller population of students, had 4 English teachers per grade level. Whereas when I got there, we had a larger population, and there were only 3 teachers per grade level. So, you know, it's hard to be an effective teacher in that kind of environment. For me, an inspirational teacher is Mr. Yeager. He was a near retirement age teacher that I had in the 6th grade. He was a math teacher. He was incredibly smart. He had been around since football was played with a leather helmet and a single bar across your face. He had served in the war. He was a really fascinating, really intelligent, interesting man who did incredible dry erase art.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I wasn't prepared.
The most immaculate landscapes that you ever saw. He would spend all day making them. They would sit up for about a day, and then it would be gone.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. I was not prepared.
It was almost Zen. You know, it was almost sort of Buddhist in principle on a certain level. Really fascinating stuff. And he was a very patient man who also, like, when he saw students were struggling, knew how to sit down and help them and would reach out to parents. And he was a trooper. He had a student, like, dislocate his arm and, like, do some soft tissue damage when he tried to break up a fight. At his old age. And
oh my gosh.
He taught through the rest of the year because he didn't want to take the time off for the surgery. And so he taught through the remainder of the year. And he was a really cool guy. I liked Mr. Yeager a lot. And so that's I think my inspirational teacher. And he saw that I was having a hard time, and he helped me really get a better grip on math. And, like, if you want an example of, like, great math teaching versus bad math teaching, 8th grade I had a teacher, or 6th grade I had a great teacher that I loved. Got along with him great. He worked hard. He worked with me. Incredible teacher. 7th grade had a woman that I just ran headlong into. And it was just a full personality clash, you know, and everyone has, I think, those stories of teachers that they do just have those full-blown, we're not jiving sort of experiences with. And I could be a really stubborn shit. And so I dug my heels in hard, and I ended up having a terrible time in 7th grade math. Yeah. So that's the kind of varied experience that you can have, you know. And it's a hard job. And you know, I certainly don't blame any teacher that starts and then leaves, because it's a difficult job. But yeah.
With shit pay.
But that's kind of all that we have for that part of the discussion. Now we'll move on to the news portion, which actually we're recording on Wednesday, and we're going to record a little bit of the show tomorrow, because what started as a simple announcement, shocking but simple announcement of Batgirl is no longer being released, turned into a scuttlebutt of maybe HBO Max is being completely canceled.
Oh.
And so it's a very developing situation. There is supposed to be an earnings call, a report, you know, to investors tomorrow, where they are going to talk about some of what has been going on. But to fill y'all in, essentially what happened is it was announced that Batgirl, it was broken in, I want to say, the New York Post, that Batgirl was not going to be released. And in any capacity, not theatrically, not in HBO Max. It was decided that it was just going to be shelved. And that shocked a lot of people, and it set a lot of worry and concern. And then again, there was this sudden rumor that HBO Max was apparently going to potentially just be gone. And then today, they went and they removed 6 HBO Max original films off of the platform, including Seth Rogen's An American Pickle. So, not really sure what that means moving forward for a lot of stuff. Again, there are rumors right now that HBO will continue to be a channel that you can get cable, you know, a cable package for.
Well, that just sounds like death for them.
And all of their HBO content is going to then be a tab in Discovery Plus, and they'll no longer make any HBO Max original content. All of that money is going to now go toward continuing to make reality TV sort of content for the Discovery app. So it's a very uncertain situation. This might mean the end of things like Peacemaker, the show. It might mean the end of things like Harley Quinn. So it's very, very uncertain what all is happening. There are rumors that like 70% of the staff is going to be let go. It's a real... And no one understands, if you go on social media and you follow industry insiders and industry people, no one understands what the fuck is going on right now at this particular point in time.
No, yeah, it's just a really, it sounds like a conundrum here, because, like, at the end of the day, I think that of the apps that we actually own, we use HBO Max, surprisingly, the most out of all of them.
And it's doing really, really well. It has some of the best original content. It has some great original movies. Like, HBO Max is legitimately doing great right now as far as the streaming wars go. And so people assumed that them buying it was because they wanted to continue that.
Yeah.
But so far it seems that they're wanting to just hawk what they can, melt the thing down, pay off some of the taxes of the purchase with what they make. That's one of the rumors about what they're going to do with the Batgirl movie, is that they're writing the taxes off on it, which will make it so that they legally can never release it or sell it to another studio because they took the tax write-off on it. And so they're then going to use that for part of their tax bill toward the purchase of HBO.
And who's they?
Discovery.
Copy. Well, the funny thing is like, Discovery really thinks that, like, we care about Discovery's live action stuff that much.
There are a lot of people who are saying that if they go down this route, they are going to just completely unsubscribe from all forms of HBO in full.
Because, like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah. So we'll be taking a little bit of a pause in our recording and finishing up the show tomorrow when we know a little bit more. So today's investor call, happened. It was at 4:30 p.m. That was why we sort of did this split recording.
Such a weird time to do something. It's almost like they don't really want people to know about it.
And the big reveal is that everything has been clarified. So in summer, I guess not everything, but mostly, in summer 2023, HBO Max and Discovery Plus will both cease to be, and there will be a new merged service.
I hope they have some weird celebrity couple name merging of the sources.
HBO Discovery.
All of this will be worth it for that.
And there will be scripted and non-scripted or reality content. So essentially, Discovery Plus and HBO, will still be operating, but it'll now be under one umbrella.
Okay.
The person who's going to become the head of scripted is a current HBO person.
Okay.
So they're getting brought up. And they'll continue on to also have non-scripted content. And so that's kind of where they're at right now with things. And they have been going through and sort of trimming the fat and reshaping the company to their vision. And I mean trimming the fat not in the sense that anything should have actually been cut, but I mean trimming the fat from their perspective. So they've gone through and now started the process of reshaping.
Okay.
So that's where we currently stand. And I guess we can then take the purge of certain pieces of content also on a certain level as a disavowing of that as like a part of the brand.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of the update for everyone. It's interesting. We'll see how well it works.
If it works at all.
But don't worry. HBO can just be sold again. This is like the third owner in a decade.
It's so sad.
Because it had been AT&T.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, it was just Time Warner, I thought.
I think it was just Time Warner.
And so then it was AT&T, and now it's, of course, Discovery. So
I like the Discovery of all channels has enough clout that it's like I can afford HBO.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a bold move, Discovery. Who knew? Coming up from behind.
Well, it's certainly a real shakeup of the whole landscape, and we'll see how well it works. Discovery has, of course, never really handled the theatrical market in any kind of hard concept.
No, it's fine. I mean, the whole thing's just going to be Disney eventually anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
But it's definitely worth following to continue to follow as things continue to develop, because this is definitely not the end. So I would definitely urge people who advocate for physical media, this is definitely a key point. You have now had a company go through and decide that an entire filmed movie won't be released, has gone through and pulled 6 movies off of their streaming platform, so that way, they can start to reshape it. And sure, they're available on VOD, but does that last forever? So, to all the people who have sort of asked why it's worth buying something when it's right there on the streaming service? This is why. Is because at the end of the day, you can buy a hard copy of something and own it, and then the only way that someone is going to take it back is literally coming in and physically taking that back. And so, this is a welcome reminder that physical media still matters, is still relevant, and is worth preserving. Because in this present state, fuck it, man. What's tangible?
No, yeah, nothing's real. That's fine. That's fine for a while until you start realizing it.
When you realize eventually that you own nothing, what are you left with, right? When everything is a subscription to a varietal.
Or you think you own something, but then the platform decides that they're going to get rid of it, so it just get wiped from your device.
Yeah. And so this is the importance of ownership of certain things, of the fact that it shouldn't just be left up to corporations who owns a piece of our culture. Because at the end of the day, we should all think about art in some capacity as a piece of our culture. And if a corporation can just decide that we don't deserve it anymore, or it's more profitable for them to not have it available to us, they will strip it from us. And that's erasure of people's hard work, of someone's expression. And that's ultimately, at the end of the day, completely ridiculous. And if any of those people who are all for the Snyderverse, or at least the return of the Snyder Cut, care about this kind of thing, then they should also be as embroiled in this fight.
That's right. Use your troll powers for good this time.
Exactly. Because this is the same kind of thing. This is the same kind of mindset at the end of the day. So, that's all that we have for you, now that we've given you a little bit of a proper update on that bit of news. I don't have anything left for the viewers. Check out all of our summer movie episodes. And come back next week when we jump into our next school stereotype, jocks and cheerleaders. Dear, do you have anything else for the listeners?
Gosh darn it, nay. But that's okay. Live your best lives, people. Have a good time, and we'll see you next week. Pinky promise.
Yeah. You know what? And I do have one last thing. Go out. I don't care if it's from a bargain bin. I don't care if it's from a secondhand shop. I don't care where you go and get it from. Go out and buy a movie. That movie that you've thought about having. That movie that you wonder why you don't have it. Go out, buy a movie. And that's my final message to you, dear listener.
Yeah, it's a liberating experience to use the money that you've earned for something other than a savings account. Who knew?
Well, and it's also just good to have something that you love, something that you connect with, something that is emotionally resonant that then you can go back to and access regardless of any subscription, as long as you've got power and a player.
Power and a player indeed.
So, that's my final message to you, dear listener. I hope that you enjoyed the show. I hope that you had a teacher that was good. If you have a teacher that you're still in contact with, also go and reach out to them. I'm sure that they would appreciate it. Come back next week. We'll talk to you guys later. Bye.